We're going to take a quick break to hear a word from our sponsors. This episode of the Made to Sustain podcast is brought to you with the support of Juneberry Ridge in Norwood, North Carolina. There aren't many places quite like it. Juneberry Ridge is an expansive farm set on the foothills of the Uwharrie Mountains, and it's a farm designed to be a destination to nourish, educate, and build a better future. It's a place that welcomes guests from all over the country to reconnect with nature, to retreat into comfy, cozy cabins, and enjoy delicious farm-fresh food. Every experience at Juneberry Ridge is prepared through a partnership amongst the land, the animals, the farmers who work it, and a culinary team whose mission it is to awaken curiosity for seasonal eating. The foods grown at Juneberry Ridge are not optimized for size and scale like conventional farming practices, but through regenerative practices that promote the health of you, the plant, and the planet. Their motto at Juneberry Ridge is to let nature lead. I was so grateful I got to visit this special place in North Carolina, and I think you will be too. They have so many activities from mixology courses to forest bathing to bottle feeding baby lambs, and even the occasional concert. There's so much to do here, and they really invite community to come in and learn more about the future of farming. You can learn more about farm stays, about other activities, and about education opportunities at juneberry.com. Hello. Welcome back to the Made to Sustain podcast. I'm your host, Kelly D'Amico, and I'm here to help make sustainable food simple for you. I'm so excited to introduce to you our guest this week, Emma from the Simple Environmentalist. Emma is a content creator who specializes in accessible, eco, and zero-waste living, and we have a really interesting discussion today about plastic-free and biodegradable packaging and different initiatives going on in this space through different companies she's worked with, and just the latest trends that we've seen in the zero-waste movement. I think it's really important to acknowledge the zero-waste movement as a consumer because you're not only reducing waste that impacts the planet and landfills, but you're also reducing spending on things that you might not have thought of. So it's a win for the planet and it's a win for your wallet. I really enjoyed this conversation with Emma. We touch upon a bunch of different topics, from personal care to food brands to new packaging innovations and really interesting ways that we've seen companies approach more responsible consumption, and some advice that companies can use and implement in their own brands. We end with just some tips that you can take away to implement more sustainable practices in your everyday lifestyle. So today's episode, I'm sure you'll enjoy it as much as I did. Thanks. Hey everyone, welcome to the Made to Sustain podcast. I'm here with my guest, Emma Dendler from the Simple Environmentalist. Hey Emma.
Hi everyone, thanks for having me.
You're so welcome. I'm so happy you're here.
I'm excited.
Cool. Maybe you could give us a quick introduction of who you are and what the Simple Environmentalist is.
Sure. So my name is Emma, and I started the Simple Environmentalist 5 or 6 years ago. It's been a long time. Started on YouTube and Instagram, then got into blogging, got into TikTok. I dabble in a little bit of everything social media these days. And honestly, since the beginning, my mission has always been to make zero waste living accessible, showing people that you don't have to change your whole life. You can do zero waste exactly where you are with exactly what you already have, trying to make it free, easy, and fun.
I love that. And that is the perfect background for our topic today on plastic-free and biodegradable packaging. So I'm super happy to have you here. Cool. Well, I like to start by asking my guests, what is the most interesting thing you've eaten lately?
Honestly, I can't say I've eaten anything interesting lately. We just moved to northern Minnesota, and we're an hour from town, and the town is only about 2,000 people. So our options are pretty basic: pizza, salad, pasta. But I guess before that, on our trip up here, we stopped in Madison, Wisconsin, Wisconsin's home of cheese, and we tried vegan cheese curds, which were fantastic.
Really? What were they made out of?
I have no idea. Oh, Dan is in the background. He said cashews, and they were so melty and gooey. They were so good.
That is so interesting. Cheese curds have such a distinct texture. I feel like it'd be so hard to match that.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't quite that chewy consistency of the dairy ones. It was more melty, but I preferred that anyway.
Yeah, some people don't like the squeakiness on your teeth.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, that usually leads me to my next question of, are you worried about vegan cheese curds being impacted at all by climate change?
I don't know. Maybe not like specifically vegan cheese curds, but I do think about that a lot. Just our food systems being impacted by climate change. Like a lot of our favorite things are coffee and chocolate. And both of those I know are very impacted by climate change. And I probably think about that way more than the average person, specifically chocolate. I love chocolate. And I'm like, is it possible that I might experience my last taste of chocolate in my lifetime and then never have it again? I hope not. But yeah, something to definitely think about.
I think about that all the time. I
Hmm.
like to say that loving coffee is a personality trait of mine. And I'm very worried if anything were to ever happen to coffee. So
Hmm.
definitely always try to support sustainable coffee brands. Hopefully they'll be around in the long run
For sure.
to feed my addiction.
Just you.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I know you've done a lot of work in the space of plastic free and zero waste living and
Hmm.
biodegradable packaging. What are some of the more innovative things that you've seen?
Ooh, this one that comes to mind. I'm blanking on the name of the skincare brand. Lolly, Loli, maybe something like that. They sent me a package years ago, like right when I first got to Las Vegas, and it was the coolest packaging I've ever seen because it's glass. They wanted to protect it. And a lot of people will do those like little biodegradable packing peanuts, but they had like an actual mold. It looked like a styrofoam mold, but it was 100% made out of mushrooms. And I was able to just put it in a pot of dirt and it decomposed so quickly.
Wow, that is so
Yeah.
interesting. I've seen a
Mhm.
lot about mycelium packaging and the mushroom based
Mm.
packaging,
Mhm.
but I haven't ever purchased a product that had it.
Yeah, cuz some bioplastics don't, and that's always disappointing. So it's really cool to see one that actually decomposes and decomposes fully and quickly.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because I actually wrote a post on compostable, like biodegradable and plastic free cutlery. And
Hmm.
some of the things that, only after digging into the space did I realize that, like, a lot of the ones that say compostable need to
Mm.
be composted in an industrial compost machine, which is not
Yep.
accessible. And I think that's right up your avenue with making zero waste
Right.
living accessible for all. 'Cause it's definitely not accessible for me, and I'm in a densely populated state.
Right. And it even reminds me a lot of recycling is these companies will just put like recyclable, compostable on their packaging without explaining how. And a lot of consumers, even if they have a backyard compost, they'll put this bioplastic in there and then, months, maybe even years later, they'll still find it because it's not the right environment for it to break down. Similar to recycling, someone might put a thin plastic in their recycling bin because the brand labeled it as recyclable without all of those disclaimers and nuances that are needed. So a little bit of, I guess maybe there will need to be a new word for it in the future because we have wish cycling for when people recycle incorrectly. Wish composting, I don't know. So yeah, more education as well as making it more accessible.
What do you think the hardest part about getting that education out is, or with the recycling program in general?
I don't know. Because I know, like with recycling, a lot of companies now have started to put stickers on the tops of their bins. Because, 10, 15 years ago, when recycling was still pretty new to a lot of regions, there were no rules ever passed out in the mail or on the bin. So I think that's helpful, having the rules on top of the bin. But are people actually reading that? I doubt it. Our bin in Las Vegas had the rules printed on it, and I always saw our neighbors throwing stuff that did not belong in the recycling bin in the recycling bins. While it's a good step, I'm not sure that it's actually effective. And it's hard to make something that's effective for the masses because unless people are going out right now and looking at their recycling facilities website, they're not going to find out this information unless maybe they're talking to their neighbors, which I also doubt. It's all very tricky. And like I do environmental or recycling education online, but then of course that's the people who are already interested in recycling, are already interested in low waste living, and those people are probably already recycling correctly. It's hard to get that message to people who are recycling incorrectly and probably don't care about the planet.
Yeah. Yeah. I also want to highlight one of the biggest problems is the issue with our recycling industry today, and that only
Mm,
7% of the plastics that are produced today are actually recycled, which is just mind boggling when you
right.
think about, not even by choice, how much plastic we go through just for
Mm-hmm.
everyday items, right? Like I
Yep.
ate a bowl of yogurt this morning, and I buy the bigger containers so that that way it's less
Mm,
plastic, but I still don't really have much of a choice,
mm-hmm.
unless I make it myself, but that's a whole nother
Right.
story.
Yeah, and even little stuff like fruit stickers, um, receipts. Receipts have plastic coating on them. Like there's hidden plastic everywhere. Even if you try your best to avoid it, it's hard to avoid it 100%.
Yeah. And we live in very different environments, right? So you're
Mm.
more on the road. What are the challenges that you see on the road with zero waste living?
Mm. I guess recycling is one of them. We collect our recycling no matter where we are, but then sometimes we have to like drive to a recycling center to drop it off. Sometimes we get lucky and the campground will have the recycling there for us, but then also the rules differ based on the state, based on the city. So making sure that we're being aware of the rules and following them. And then also, it's harder to make stuff from scratch in the RV.
Yeah.
So, like while we were on the road, actively this spring, we did have to buy like bread in packaging and stuff. But now that we're settled and we have a community kitchen, I can start baking sourdough again. It's also hard to shop in bulk sometimes because we just don't have the space for a lot of jars full of nuts and seeds. So those are some of the biggest challenges, I think.
Yeah. That's really challenging. And that sounds like almost a full time job trying to keep track of all of the recycling laws. I mean, I'm sure you're probably loaded with so many other priorities, right? Like, where are you going to get
Mm,
gas? Where are you going to stop? And
mm,
are you going to have a connection as a creator?
mm,
I'm sure those things are all way more important, but for you to make
right.
recycling and just disposing of your trash and your waste in the most responsible way, kudos
Hmm.
to you for that, because not everybody would
Thank
take
you.
the time to do that.
For sure. And it, yeah, that makes me really sad too that not everybody will take the initiative to recycle because while recycling for plastic is definitely not even worth it, honestly. But recycling stuff like metal, glass, and paper, they have very, very high recycling rates. Especially metal is so valuable and also so environmentally harmful to create new. Like even here, we have a recycling bin here at the park, but it's a little bit of a walk or a drive to get to. And people still won't even do that little walk to recycle their cans. They put them in the dumpster, and it just makes me so sad.
Ugh. I want to talk a little bit more about what you just mentioned about
Mm.
metal recycling and glass and paper, what each of them mean.
I'll just start talking about recycling, and you can stop me if I'm saying something that you don't want to hear.
Sure.
So, they're all very valuable to recycle, but paper is a little similar to plastic in that it can't be recycled infinitely. I actually did an experiment. I think it was during COVID when I was bored and like, what else am I going to do besides recycle paper at home? And I didn't add any more pulp to the mix, and I did end up with fewer and fewer sheets every time I recycled the same piece of paper. So the fibers shrink, and eventually you can't recycle the paper anymore. But glass and metal can be recycled infinitely, and that means that the quality is not lost no matter how many times you recycle the same can over and over again, which makes them both extremely valuable to recycle. And both glass and metal are very harmful to the environment to create new. Glass is made from sand and metal is made from metal. But both require a lot of energy to extract, a lot of energy to heat up and turn into new metal and glass. Um, Big reasons why both of those are very valuable and also have high recycling rates. Unlike paper, it's a little bit less resource intensive to grow a tree or grow bamboo. Plastic is very, very harmful to create, a lot of energy going into creating plastic, but plastic is subsidized because it's a byproduct of the oil industry, which is subsidized. So there's really not an incentive to recycle plastic on like a big scale. It just costs too much money when companies could be creating new plastic for cheaper, which is really sad. So that's a very systemic thing that needs fixed beyond something that, you and I can do. But I think that's why it's extremely important to recycle correctly, make sure everything that you're recycling is clean and dry, following your rules, and then also supporting the recycling industry on the other end. Like if you see something made out of recycled paper versus new paper, buy the recycled paper, buy the recycled plastic to show that there is a demand for recycling.
Yeah. And I think that's really interesting that you talk about recycling and the subsidies behind it or behind the plastics industry. I only learned this within the past couple years, but apparently we used to send all of our plastic
Mm,
overseas to get recycled, which
yep.
also has a large emissions associated with the transport from
Hmm.
the US or from, somewhere in Europe over to Asia to be recycled. And then that recycling process also causes a lot of environmental harm to the citizens living in the area because of
Mm,
all the
hmm.
pollutants that come from the recycling process and the
Hmm.
microplastics. So totally agree with you there. It's not only the right thing to do in terms of resources, but in terms of just supporting the industry as a whole. I always try to
Hmm.
opt for paper or metal or reusable packaging whenever I can.
Mm, hmm.
You have a large reach on the media, right? What are some of the challenges that people, come to you with, their biggest issues with going, maybe not zero waste, but just reducing their impact and their footprint and dependence
Mm,
on plastic?
yeah, I think these days it's become so easy to actually be zero waste in one aspect or another. But I think the biggest issue is the mindset with so many people. So many people think it's so black and white. Like you have to go 100% zero waste. You have to drive an EV and get solar panels and, use reusable toilet paper, like go so extreme, or you can't do anything at all. But really, there's that middle ground. And I always like to say that giving 1% of your energy to living eco friendly is better than giving 0%. If you can only give 50%, or you can only change 50% of your life. For example, we still drive a truck. It's very, very not environmentally friendly, but we do other environmentally friendly things. So you can make up for things here and there. You don't have to give up your entire lifestyle. And I think people really get caught up in that, as well as people thinking that their small actions don't matter. So I've been really trying to focus on that messaging a lot recently. And my favorite analogy is the reusable water bottle. Like me alone, I prevent probably 1,000 water bottles from being created every year, just one person. But so yeah, imagine 10 people quitting reusable water bottles, or 100, or 1,000, and you can really just start to see how our small collective action really adds up. And it might seem meaningless to use this reusable water bottle every day, but the impact is huge. Yeah,
Yeah, and it also, going back to accessibility, it helps support your wallet too in the long run, right? That
exactly.
initial upfront investment, if a water bottle and the cost of a single water bottle is astronomical to me, like
It is.
$3 for 16 ounces, or something like that, at least around where I am, and then a water bottle can be anywhere from like a good water bottle, a good quality water bottle, $15 to $30, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
3 or 4 water bottles, and that purchase is covered. And I think that's sometimes the mindset that people have a little bit of trouble connecting to.
Yeah, that is something I thought would kind of die off with like, peak zero waste movement in like 2016, with everybody buying all the aesthetic stuff, and it's very shown as being like an elitist expensive thing, which is why I started talking about the stuff that I talked about back in like 2018. Anyway, I thought that would kind of die off and people would start to see zero waste as more of a use what you have and you don't have to buy the expensive swaps, but there's still a stigma that zero waste is expensive. And it might seem expensive, right? If you go buy a bidet attachment, it's $100 up front. But if you look at how much money you're going to save on toilet paper over the next year, 5 years, 10 years, you're going to make your money back and then start to save money.
Hmm.
I've been kind of diving into that too on YouTube, showing these seemingly expensive swaps, but how much money they can save you not only in your first year, but every year after that. And it is a lot of money.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's something that we don't often think about. Like, I'm still amazed with the things like the Stanley Cup craze, right? And like
Oh
fifty
my God.
dollars for a single Stanley Cup, and the
Right.
purpose is the same, right? It's just to carry around water and keep it cold. And there's
Yep.
so many other vessels that can do that same exact function.
And that whole craze is just fascinating to me. Like this sustainable swap that now people are treating as like a collectible item and collecting one of every color. Like even if you used one of your water bottles every single day, you probably wouldn't use them all in a year because some people have so many. And I guess those probably aren't environmentalists doing that. But
Fair.
to the environmentalists listening, you only need one good water bottle.
Yeah. I know myself, I have a couple, but just all
Right.
of varying sizes. It depends where I'm
Mhm.
going and what I'm doing. So,
For
um,
sure.
but I haven't changed them out in years. So
Exactly.
they're reliable and serve the purpose of keeping my water cold and carrying it around. Cool. So, all right, I want to get back to biodegradable and plastic free. What are some of your favorite ways that you've been able to reduce plastic and some of your favorite zero waste swaps?
Ooh. I guess my favorite zero waste swap, as well as a way to reduce plastic, is zero waste period products. There's a whole variety of them. I prefer period underwear myself, which is the most expensive option. So if you want a budget option, menstrual discs, menstrual cups are definitely the best option. They cost like $30 or $40 one time and they last up to 10 years. It's a great investment. Period underwear too, they can last a long time, but you need several pair of them. But that's something I don't think a lot of people think about, is how much plastic is produced from having a period, and then how much you have to buy every single month when you could just buy one little cup and reuse that forever.
That's a good one. I don't know if you've ever done like a beach cleanup or participated in one, but I did a couple in college, and we had a tally how many items we were picking up, and some of the most frequently collected items were tampon applicators. It didn't hit me until that moment that I was like, wow, if we're estimating here, maybe 30% of the population has a period, right? And you have to go through a couple a day, once a month for that 30% of the population. That's a lot of plastic. I was amazed with how many there were, and they were just sitting along. I think you get a really different perspective when you see plastic out in the wild than
You really do.
where its intended use is.
Yeah, that was kind of my wake-up call too when we moved to Okinawa, Japan. I was very big into recycling. Like that was my big thing in like 2018, was I love recycling. But then I moved to an ocean community and I saw all the plastic washing up, recyclable plastic on the shores. And I'm like, wait, actually, I'm not sure recycling is doing anything. It's reduction that we need to be focusing on. So that was similar to me. Once I saw it out in nature with my own eyes, I kind of shifted my focus.
We're going to take a quick break to hear a word from our sponsors. This episode of the Made to Sustain podcast is brought to you with the support of Juneberry Ridge in Norwood, North Carolina. There aren't many places quite like it. Juneberry Ridge is an expansive farm set on the foothills of the Uwharrie Mountains, and it's a farm designed to be a destination to nourish, educate, and build a better future. It's a place that welcomes guests from all over the country to reconnect with nature, to retreat into comfy, cozy cabins, and enjoy delicious farm-fresh food. Every experience at Juneberry Ridge is prepared through a partnership amongst the land, the animals, the farmers who work it, and a culinary team whose mission it is to awaken curiosity for seasonal eating. The foods grown at Juneberry Ridge are not optimized for size and scale like conventional farming practices, but through regenerative practices that promote the health of you, the plant, and the planet. Their motto at Juneberry Ridge is to let nature lead. I was so grateful I got to visit this special place in North Carolina, and I think you will be too. They have so many activities, from mixology courses to forest bathing to bottle feeding baby lambs, and even the occasional concert. There's so much to do here, and they really invite the community to come in and learn more about the future of farming. You can learn more about farm stays, about other activities, and about education opportunities at juneberry.com. Yeah, and I think even if tampons are your preferred route, right? The cardboard ones are going to be, I know they do have a plastic coating on them, but at least part of it can degrade. It's just a really interesting topic, and there's so much conventional thinking around it when people have been having periods for millennia.
Right.
And the solutions that we have today haven't always been the ones to go around. So I think there's definitely more options than we think about.
Yeah, I get similar comments to that a lot when I go to a refill store, or when I mend, do something very basic, and everyone's like, my grandma did this. And I'm like, yeah, it is kind of an old school skill, which is sad that we kind of lost that in our modern society, but it really does show that those skills are valuable and they're always going to be important.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember learning how to sew, and I hemmed a pair of my husband's pants, and he was like, can you do another one for me? I have these too. A good skill to have, a little dangerous.
Exactly.
Cool. What about, we talk a lot about food here and in the kitchen. What are some food brands that you've seen and some plastic-free ways that you can reduce your plastic waste or just your waste in the kitchen?
Plastic free. That one's kind of hard because I feel like a lot of the brands that I've like partnered with have been shipped to me, and so they have to be like shelf stable. So I've been working with a lot of brands focusing more on food waste and like using food waste in their products, but a lot of them still come packaged, maybe not in full plastic, but in like carton board, which is partial plastic. But I guess like reducing waste in the kitchen, maybe. Um, Focus on buying stuff package free. And like this is without even having access to a bulk store or a refill store. Just going to the produce aisle and picking the individual clementines over the bag of them, the individual apples over a bag of apples. Like very, very simple stuff like that. It's a little more inconvenient to have to wrangle a bunch of apples, but that's where reusable produce bags come in. And then other stuff too. Focus building your meals on stuff that doesn't contain plastic. Pasta, even if it has a little window, is significantly less plastic than like a bag of pasta, for example. And other stuff like a can of beans versus a bag of beans. So that sort of stuff, focusing on what's recyclable in your area, what's reusable, and what's package free.
Yeah, and I think that's really hard. It's really a big obstacle
Mm-hmm.
within the food industry, just in terms of food safety and making sure that
Right.
products are going to be safe for you to eat whenever they arrive to your door. There's a lot of touch points that I don't think
Mm-hmm.
people really think about. There's a lot of people come in contact with your food before you actually get to eat it. So I'm
Oh
very
yeah.
happy that there's food safety measurements around it, but I'm excited for the possibility of things like that mycelium
Mm-hmm.
packaging that you talked about. And I
Mm-hmm.
think glass is another good one, like opting for a glass jar versus
Mm-hmm.
opting for like a plastic jar. And there's issues with that too, right? Like glass is heavier from a manufacturing perspective. Glass is really dangerous to have in a
Mm-hmm.
plant. If you drop a glass jar in a plant, you need to shut down like all of production, which I don't think
Wow.
a
I
lot of
mean, it
people.
makes sense.
Yeah, because you're at risk of getting glass shards in the food, which can be a
Yep.
huge, huge safety risk.
Yeah, I've never thought of that.
Yeah, so it's something not a lot of people think about, and then it's also
Yeah.
heavier to ship. So in
Right.
terms of the weight of the product once it's finished, I don't know. There's so many nuances in this space, and
Yeah.
just trying to kind of combat all of them all at once is really challenging.
It really is.
Yeah, I think there's a lot though that we can take away from the personal care industry. I feel
Mm-hmm.
like they've done
Mm-hmm.
a really good job. For me, for example, one of the companies I like is Grove, and they've made a commitment to
Mm.
go plastic free by I think it's 2025,
Oh,
and
good.
they've already done a great job
Mm.
with like recyclable options and not using virgin plastics in their
Mm.
plastic containing items. And
Mm-hmm.
then opting for metal and refill and concentrates where possible too.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. Is if a company can't go fully plastic free, opting for recycled plastic. I like Grove's recycled plastic trash bags because I find that the bioplastic trash bags usually don't cut it. They're pretty flimsy, but those recycled plastic trash bags are just as strong, just as sturdy, but it's more environmentally friendly. And like a bioplastic bag is going to end up in the landfill anyway. Same with food. If brands were to opt for recycled plastic or bioplastic, because yeah, safety is of utmost importance. So finding a way to keep the safety, but also, keep the planet safe as well.
Yeah, it's a really tough dance.
It
Hopefully, one
is.
day we'll figure out how to how to solve it. But I like
One
your
day.
I like your tips around. If it's possible to buy in bulk, we buy a lot in bulk. I mean, we have also the
Hmm.
benefit of having a house, and so
Mm,
we do have places that we can store it. But it does help us reduce a lot because
right.
if I go to the grocery store and I buy a bag of beans, and that's like a 3 pound bag of dried beans, then I can cook them on my own and store them in my own glass containers in the fridge versus like, having cans with liners, like BPA liners in them.
Mm,
Um,
hmm.
that's just one way that we do things and just kind of a different lifestyle.
Yeah. I think people, when they think of shopping in bulk, they think of like a refill bulk store and bringing all your jars and all of this. But yeah, another way of shopping in bulk is to just buy the largest amount in packaging, because if you buy one 3 pound bag of beans versus three 1 pound bag of beans, you're reducing two pieces of plastic.
Hmm. Yeah. And it's all just, I don't know, there's girl math, and then
Yep.
maybe this is a new form of math.
Sustainable math.
I love that. What are some of your favorite brands in this space that are working towards or have made distinguished commitments to plastic-free or biodegradable packaging?
The first one that comes to mind is Pila, the phone case company. And I really love that they've expanded to things like AirPod cases, or iPod, iPad cases. That was funny. They've even got like Apple Watch wristbands. They have so many biodegradable options. And I've tested them several times at home, and they also biodegrade fully and quickly, which is very important and usually shows that it's actually made of 100% plants.
I love my Pila case. I've
I
been
do too.
I've been using them for years. I'm very worried about my phone. I'll just throw this out there. I drop it all the time.
Me
And
too.
Pila is one that actually protects my phone, which I'm always amazed about. So
I
I
know.
really love them, and they have some really fun patterns too.
They do. Um, and yeah, they've been in the game for a long time. And I really do think they kind of led the way in environmental tech protection. I don't know if that's like a genre, but since then I've seen so many other companies do stuff like recycled plastic or wood fiber or whatever it might be. So it's cool to see them kind of leading the way. I think in the recent years, there's been some brands doing stuff like Hold On and Repurpose. They focus mostly on like bioplastic zipper bags, trash bags, kind of the stereotypical wasteful stuff that you would have in a kitchen, cups, bowls, plates, but they're made out of bioplastic or paper or some other sort of plant material. And while I don't really recommend this swap to most people, but for people who they rely on these plastic bags for whatever it may be, it's a great step in the right direction if you can't fully switch to reusables.
Yeah. I like that you always bring up accessibility because I think it's so
Mm,
important to not just make blanket statements, because I do think you're on to something here where there's not a one size fits all for zero waste or just plastic
definitely.
free in general.
Yeah. That was something I saw a lot in my early zero waste days was like everyone should switch to reusables. And I'm just like, okay, but what about people who can't lift heavy things? What about people who don't have a dishwasher and therefore they don't have the space or the time to wash all of these dishes? Like there's so many nuances and life stories that it can sometimes be dangerous to make those blanket statements. At the very least, it can be offensive.
What's the biggest area you think is overlooked in the accessibility space?
Oh my. I think some of the policies, a couple years ago, there was a lot of pushback from the disabled community with straw bans because some disabled people rely on straws. So when a restaurant no longer offers straws, now this person can't drink at a restaurant. So just including everybody in the conversation, especially when it comes to policy change, and then mitigating them. So maybe not a full on 100% straw ban, but having straws for people who need them, but not just passing them out to everybody because not everybody does need a straw. So kind of stuff like that.
Yeah, like an opt in versus
Yeah.
yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense because there are
Mhm.
sometimes, for me, I don't need a straw, but my mom had neck surgery a couple years back, and it
Mm,
was really difficult for her to, move her neck for a long period while she was in recovery. So I remember buying her a reusable plastic cup or a reusable cup that had a straw
nice.
so that she could drink. But I think you're right. There are a lot of nuances that we don't think about when we make blanket statements.
Yeah. And then just like tying it back to disability is, your mom was temporarily disabled due to the surgery. And a lot of able bodied people don't think about that. It's like,
Mhm.
oh, the straw band's not going to affect me. It might one day. You never know, whether it be for a surgery or something more serious happens. And that's why it all comes back to intersectionality.
Let's dive into that a little bit.
Yes, getting off the topic of packaging, a great book by Leah Thomas, The Intersectional Environmentalist. It talks about how previously in the zero waste movement, we have just thought totally in black and white and everybody can do everything, but really like we need to have disabled voices and BIPOC voices and so many different voices in the zero waste community because everyone comes from different walks of life. Everyone has access to different things, whether that be because of money, disability, social status, whatever it might be, and that all of these issues are also interconnected. Things like environmental racism. Most cities will build landfills in communities of color. Same with like pollutive power plants and stuff like that. Also how those of us in typically wealthier nations like the United States, we overconsume, we pollute a lot, but we're not really facing the effects of climate change. It's communities in the global south. I could talk about this for another 40 whole minutes. So I'll leave it at that for now. Definitely check out that book and just make your environmentalism accessible.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think in the United States, we don't think about the effects of climate change, but some cities
Mm-hmm.
are. Like New York City, for example, they're talking about building like a 3 foot wall around lower end
Wow.
by like the financial district and over there,
Mm,
just because of the concerns of the sea level rising and that's going to ruin the view. And it's, well, there's
that's
the sea level rise is also going to ruin your view. And cities like Miami are being
mm,
threatened with, being underwater in less than 50
yeah.
years. So I think we might not see it today. We might not talk about it
Hmm.
today, but I think once we start framing climate change away from this degree temperature rise to talking about sea level rise, we're in for a very different conversation.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm glad that the conversation has shifted more towards what we're actually seeing in terms of like weather and natural disasters and not just like, oh, the temperature is rising, because that's hard to conceptualize as the average person. But if you
Right.
tell someone in California that you're going to have more wildfires if climate change keeps going, and people in Miami, like you're going to lose your home potentially, kind of putting it into perspective for these people who might not otherwise think that 1.5 degrees Celsius is all that scary, can really help people hopefully not scare them too much, but just put it into perspective that it's going to affect you and it might even be affecting you right now.
Yeah, more than you realize. Well, I want to get back into the topic. We've got a lot of brands that listen to the show right now. If you had
Hmm.
any messages for them around supporting climate change or mitigating climate change, looking at the zero waste or plastic free space, what advice would you give to them?
Hmm. I would say my biggest advice to brands is to make the intention clear. For example, Clean Cult. They put a blanket statement on their packaging: our carton board is recyclable. End of story. When in reality, carton board is rarely accepted for recycling. It's becoming more popular, but I've lived so many places across the US, traveled to so many places across the US, and rarely do I ever find carton board recycling. And like, I get behind carton board, it is better than plastic. It's not perfect. No packaging is perfect. But if they were to just put on their packaging, like go to this website to see if it's recyclable in your area, encouraging consumers to recycle correctly and not just wish cycle, because that's what they're encouraging. And then other brands too, bioplastic brands, saying it's compostable, end of story, saying this is compostable industrially, or this is backyard compostable, specifying those rules on their packaging, specifically the packaging, because not everybody's also going to take the time to go to their website to read these nuances or take the time to do this Google search. Is carton board actually recyclable in my area? Just making it as dummy proof as possible for the consumer, especially the consumer who might not be that interested in the environment. Because, me, having lived zero waste for so long and being obsessed with recycling, I'm going to take the time to research that. But I know I'm the anomaly. I know a lot of these brands have good intentions, but the way that they're executing can sometimes lead to not the best outcome.
Yeah, and I agree. I know that for brands and companies in particular, the real estate on the packaging label is so finite, right, and so
Right,
valuable.
right.
But if you are a sustainable brand and you're trying to encourage people to do the right thing and really think about the end of life of your packaging, not just the consumption experience, but what happens after it's done, I think that's a huge step in the right
Right.
direction.
Especially because a lot of these eco brands, you can only buy them online anyway, so it's going to be shipped to you in a bigger package. Just putting a little slip of paper in that package or printing it directly on the box, like, go to this website for recycling instructions or something like that.
Yeah, I actually worked with a company called Tilden, and they really encouraged people to recycle. They ship as much as they can in the smallest box possible, and that's kind
Hmm.
of their mission. And they have on the box to make sure you recycle this box. And one thing I really liked about them is that as you're breaking down the box, you can find a discount code if you are recycling properly. I thought that was a very creative way
Yeah.
to encourage people to recycle, to do the right thing, and keep coming back for more.
Hmm. Definitely incentivize it. That reminds me of Plain Products. They do a whole lot of bathroom swaps, shampoo, conditioner, lotion, and they take their bottles back for recycling. A lot of brands do this now, but they make the consumers pay for it. But plain products, without even asking, they give you a shipping label in your initial order so that you have a box, you have a label, you have a cap. You don't even have to clean it. They will clean it there at their facility. Um, they do all of the work for you. They make it so easy for you to encourage for the consumer to keep reusing.
I love that. I'm sure that's
Mm-hmm.
a much needed, very expensive investment on their end, but it's
Mm-hmm.
really cool because it's doing the right thing. And, I'm sure at the end it saves them some money from buying new bottles.
I'm
So,
sure it does. And that was another thing I would give advice to brands is encourage reusability. And it doesn't have to be like plain, like reusing in your own company. But when I send out like giveaways and stuff, I'll write on the box, like this box is reused, reuse me again. Just a little reminder that even something as not sturdy as cardboard, you can reuse it a couple times before recycling it. And reusing is always better than recycling.
yeah, I like that too.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think some of the most, we're running out of time here, so I want to ask you just a couple more questions. What's something that you wish more people understood about sustainability and food sustainability?
I guess just how disconnected most people are from our food systems. There was a viral TikTok a couple months ago that someone was absolutely shocked that you could take an apple off of a tree and eat it.
What?
Yeah, I know. It's crazy that, like, we're so connected to our food systems, but so many people are not. They don't realize that it's grown from the ground, a person harvests it off the tree or off of the plant, and like how many people are involved in the process. So just kind of getting reconnected to your food systems, even if it's still going to your grocery store, if you can't have a garden, you can't forage or whatever, but just being mindful about how much human energy and also energy in terms of fuel, all that sort of stuff, harvesting, fertilizing, goes into creating your one apple or your one bag of rice or whatever it is. um, and I think that, and like same with our clothes and everything we own, being mindful about the people who made it and how much energy went into it can help you respect it a little bit more, hopefully, take care of your items, and also not want to create food waste, because that item has value not only to your own wallet. It's wasteful to throw away something that you spent money on, but also it's disrespectful to the people who grew it.
Yeah, I agree. And all of the resources that go in behind, from the labor to the trucking to other forms of inputs that have to go into the system.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm sorry. I'm still mind boggled that somebody didn't realize you can eat an apple off of a
I
tree.
know.
That is crazy. Some of my childhood memories are just going apple picking, so that's
Right.
very, very different. But
Mm-hmm.
wow. But just in terms of going back to the resources that go into it, that's one of my favorite reasons to go and support my local farmers market, and support the farmers that are close by. I think if you're looking for waste-free packaging, a farmer's market is one of the best ways that you can do that.
Yeah, as well as they can be so much more affordable too, because it's grown right there. It doesn't have to be shipped across the country or even the world. Oh my gosh, and it tastes so much better too.
Yeah, food in season is always better. I'm a
Hmm.
firm believer in that.
Oh yeah.
Just a couple last questions for you here. What's your favorite unconventional way to do something zero waste?
Ooh. Ooh. Oh my gosh, I don't know. I don't do it anymore, and I would do it again if I lived in a house. But when we were in Las Vegas, especially, it's been in like a 25-year drought. The Lake Mead is scary low, and we were under a lot of water restrictions. And I kind of took that to the next step, and I caught all of our gray water, and it was disgusting. It was so unconventional. It took a lot of time, but I was just really dedicated to conserving as much water as we can. And of course, we lived in an HOA, so we couldn't do anything with our landscaping. We were renters too. So we had to water our plants. Our plants had to remain green or we would get a fine from the HOA.
Wow.
So I would use all of this collected gray water to water our plants instead of using, fresh water to clean the dishes and fresh water to water the plants.
Wow. That's impressive. That's not something I would think of, but that is really promising. And I like to do that actually with, like, if I steam broccoli or something, and I
Oh,
like to
yeah.
take the excess liquid and obviously let it cool first, but then if you
Hmm.
feed it to your plants, they love it.
Hmm.
And lastly, where can folks find you, and learn more about the Simple Environmentalist?
I'm basically on any social media at the Simple Environmentalist, except for TikTok. Not enough characters. I'm just Simple Environmentalist. When in doubt, you can go to my website, thesimpleenvironmentalist.com, and all my socials are on there.
Great. Any last thoughts?
I guess I will just restate what I said earlier in that your small actions really do matter. Even if they seem small, they seem meaningless. The more of us that do more small actions, the more it adds up.
I love that. Thanks so much, Emma, for coming on today and for this really insightful conversation. I'm so glad you were able to come.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And I thought of like 7 more topics I could talk about for 40 more minutes. So maybe I'll be back.
Well, I hope so. We'll see.
I could talk about this stuff forever.
Great. All right. Well, thanks so much.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode talking with Emma, the Simple Environmentalist. I really enjoyed that we can incorporate zero waste and just minimal waste options within our everyday lives. I think it's really practical and really easy advice to follow. And I think it also helps us emphasize that collectively every small change can make a bigger impact. My top 3 takeaways from today's episodes are within the zero waste, plastic-free, or biodegradable packaging space, or just sustainable living in general, there is no one-size-fits-all, and I think we need to take into account different people's needs. The really interesting conversation around what works best for everyone with feminine products, with like a straw ban, for instance. I think it's really a good reminder that everyone has different circumstances, and something that works for you might not be the best option for somebody else. I think my second key takeaway from that is that if you're looking to make these types of changes, go for the one that sticks for you, right? You don't need to go and spend a lot of money getting matching sets of eco-friendly containers. There are simple ways that you can reduce your waste at home. And yeah, make sure you do what works best for you. So small changes that you make will have a better likelihood of sticking and staying than something that maybe just doesn't fit into your lifestyle. And then my last takeaway for this is that collectively all of our small actions can have a bigger impact in the long run. So I think the efforts of us collectively can make a bigger impact. So that's it for today's episode. I really hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you check out Emma at the Simple Environmentalist on her YouTube channel, TikTok, Instagram, and everywhere else. I've done a few collaborations with Emma on YouTube, so you can check those out. And make sure you check out madetosustain.com to learn more about sustainable food made simple, to learn more about how you can incorporate sustainable food within your day-to-day. Make sure you come back next week where we're going to be talking to Joni from The Snacktivist. I think it's a really interesting episode, and we're going to talk a lot about regenerative farming and how we can make a difference using some ancient grains, and how we can opt for ancient grains and things like that. So make sure you come back next week. I'm so happy you decided to tune in, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks. Bye.